I'm Jay from Highlights Along the Way, and today I'll be showing you how to make sourdough bread. So let's get to it. In order to have great sourdough bread, you need to have a sourdough starter with active yeast. The yeast is what makes the bread so fluffy because it breaks down the proteins in the bread and creates air bubbles as it basically eats the bread. In order to make your yeast active, you need to feed it. Scant 1 cup of flour and half a cup of water. Scant 1 cup means a little less than 1 cup, by the way. I like to use bread flour when I'm making sourdough bread. You can use all-purpose flour, but it's not going to be quite as fluffy and it's going to be slightly closer to like a cake texture, which it will still cook the same. It just won't taste quite the same. Okay, so now I'm going to feed my sourdough starter. I'm going to add my scant 1 cup flour. And once I've got all of that added, I'm going to add my half cup water. And just put that in there like so. And then once I've got all this in here, you can just mix it up just to incorporate it like so. Once this is mixed up, it's going to be kind of drippy and chunky. It's going to kind of look like a drippy sort of dough. That's okay, that's what you want it to look like. Sort of a cream color. It's going to be kind of chunky and you won't see a whole lot of bubbles on the sides. That's okay because the yeast hasn't started absorbing it yet. But eventually you'll see some bubbles on the side. And then you're just going to secure this with plastic wrap to hold some of the air so that it creates bubbles, but also let some escape. You don't want to put a lid on this. Then put this in a warm spot like your pantry or on top of your fridge and repeat this feeding process every 12 hours until your sourdough starter is bubbly and passes the float test. The float test is when a little bit of sourdough starter dropped in a cup of water floats. Once you've fed your sourdough starter a few times, it's going to grow. So what I do is I put it into a big bowl and I cover it with aluminum foil, and it should look like this when it's ready. This is what active sourdough starter looks like. When it gets to this point, remove half a cup for your next sourdough starter so you can make more bread, and then continue using this. So that's what it looks like when it's active. So we're going to, once it's active, we can start making our dough, which starts by making our flavoring for our bread. This is super simple. All it is take a glass, you put a 1/4 cup water into it, and then you add 1 tablespoon of salt. So now we're just going to mix this up. And now we'll just set this aside to let it dissolve. Once you have your salt dissolved in, you can set that aside and begin your dough. So you're going to need 2 cups of water, so you'll add that first. So we're just going to mix this up. It's going to kind of look like milk with sourdough starter floating around with it. It won't completely combine, but you're just going to kind of get this mostly combined and mixed up. Now once you've got your water mixed in, you're going to add 5½ cups of flour. I'm just going to mix this up with a rubber spatula. It should look somewhat like this, kind of scruffy and shaggy and floury dough. It could look wetter or drier depending on how much leaven you started with. You could have less or more depending on how active your starter was when you started feeding it. So it should look something like this. Okay, so now I'm going to cover this in aluminum foil and let it rise for 30 minutes to 4 hours. See you then. Alright, it's been about 1.5 hours, so I just took my bread dough out. So you can see it's risen a little bit. It doesn't double in size like other bread doughs, but it does rise a bit. So now we're just going to add our salt. I'm just going to pour this in. Once you add this, it's going to look a lot wetter and smoother. It should look somewhat like this once you've mixed your salt mixture in. We are going to start folding the dough. So if you started out with a less active starter, you would need to feed it more times before you started making your dough, which means you might have more dough than I do. If So then this is the time where you should separate it into 2 different bowls. So if you have more dough for that reason, then you should separate it into 2 bowls and then continue, and you'll end up with 2 loaves of bread instead of 1. Okay, so now we're going to start folding the dough. We'll sprinkle some flour on top and get some more on your hands. And then we're just going to spread this around and then just pull up and fold. Turn the bowl 90 degrees and then pull up and fold. Fold the bread 4 to 6 times every time you fold the dough. You're going to fold the bread dough 6 times over a course of 2.5 hours every 30 minutes. In between folding, just cover this with aluminum foil and put it in a warm place. Okay, it's been 2.5 hours. I folded this every 30 minutes. It's turned into more of like a dough ball. I'm just gonna cover this and let it rest for 30 to 60 minutes. To proof the dough, we are going to take a clean kitchen towel and press it into a bowl. We're just gonna take the flour and just rub it into this cloth. This is what's gonna stop the bread to sticking to the kitchen towel. Just sprinkle it around. Use more than you think that you'll need because sometimes it sticks. So just rub that into the cloth like so and put it back in the bowl. Alright, so I've actually managed to keep a lot of the air bubbles in this old guy. So I am going to divide this into what will be 2 loaves of bread. I'm just going to break this in half. Alright, got one right here. And got one guy right here. So now I'm going to put these in the fridge and let them rise for 3 to 4 hours or overnight. I like to do overnight so they can rise as much as possible. So I'll see you tomorrow morning. Forgot to say this, but be sure to cover these in plastic wrap. These have been chilling overnight in the fridge, so now we're going to bake them. So the first thing we need to do is set our oven to 500 degrees. Once you've got your oven preheating, it's time to transfer these to a Dutch oven or a heavy bottomed pot. If you don't have a Dutch oven, I don't. I'm just using a big pot. It's just an ordinary stainless steel pot. So we're not going to grease these. We're not going to grease the pot. Instead, we're just going to flour the bottom of it. Then you can just put your dough in here and tuck under the edges of it so that it forms a nice round dough ball. And I will just use a knife to score the top of this and make a nice, pretty X. So it will end up looking like that. And then we're just gonna take this and put it into the oven, the whole pot and all, and let this cook for 20 minutes. After that, you will just reduce the oven temperature to 450 degrees and cook for another 10 minutes. Then remove the lid and cook for 15 to 25 more minutes. After removing the lid, it will look something like this. After those 15 to 25 minutes, it will end up looking like this. So you'll want to cook this until it is just short of burnt. So after those 15-25 minutes, you can put on another 15 to 25 minutes, and it should look just short of burnt when it's done. Okay, so this just came out of the oven. It looks beautiful. Golden brown, this is what it looks like once it's completely done. All right, we got our bread out of the oven. It's nice and tall and puffed and very light. And you can see it's got that dark brown around it and a very tough crust when you knock on it. It should sound like that, like kind of hollow. That's how you know it's baked through, and it's very squishy and it bounces back if you touch it. So that's how you know when your bread's cooked through. So I guess all there's left to do now is enjoy. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful. Bye!